Some big developments today in the Alec Murdock murder trial. We know that the jury went to Moselle to take a look at that property, the scene where those crimes happened. Closing arguments from the prosecution, from Creighton Waters, and we know that in fact tomorrow the defense will present their closing arguments. Joining us right now is Ronnie Richter of the Bland Richter Law Firm to offer more insight into what we heard today. Ronnie, thank you very much for being with us, of course. Let's get right to it and talk about Creighton Waters' points that he made today that may have in fact landed well on that jury.
Yeah, I think the high water for Creighton, and he did an excellent job. It's a big case, over 60 witnesses, over 500 pieces of evidence, so it's hard to put together in one summation. He had a clear theme, number one, that Alex had the motive, the means, and the opportunity.
And he said that many times.
Kept coming back to that. Three in a theme is very powerful, and he kept returning to that theme. So structurally, the closing argument was very sound. Okay, so I thought that was a very positive for him. He leaned heavily into the timeline around the kennel incident itself, which was fantastic. He also leaned heavily on Dr. Kinsey, who I think was the state's best witness.
Talking about those expert witnesses again, let's talk about that timeline though, because he really did spend a lot of time showing exactly those times, the correlations between those times.
Yeah, and you don't want to make a closing argument a history exam, okay? So if you put too many dates, times, and places, you worry that the jury's going to fail. Now, I think at times he did that. I think there were too many data points. But the ones that he drove home, and I wrote this down because I don't want to get it wrong, but this was crystal clear, that the kennel video starts at 8:44:55. It ends at 8:45:45. Alex then admits that there was time playing with the chicken or handling Bubba, so you add some time to that. Maggie and Paul's phones go dead for the last time at 8:49. There's time for Alex to get back to the house, and his phone at the house becomes active at 9:02. So that all fits together very tightly and dispels any idea that Alex was not there or that he was back at the house napping.
And he also brought up the fact that he knew exactly what he was doing in some cases with his phone, but in other times unsure of how he'd handled his own phone.
Yeah, his inconsistency and unreliability as a witness was brought out, I think, in fabulous fashion. And he highlighted, one lie that Alex didn't need to give was that the sheriff had authorized him to put the blue lights in the car. Clearly that's not true, so Creighton was able to turn to the jury and tell him, look, he looked you in the eye and lied to you too.
And also, let's talk about the big lie. The fact that we were able to see that video again, why he lied at that moment, even bringing Rogan into that and talking about that lie as well.
Yeah, and we talked about it before, that by putting Alex on the stand, you've turned a complicated case into a single issue case. And the single issue is, why did you lie about this most important matter, right? And it's not that he just lied once. He carried that lie forward. He lied repeatedly. In his story, I lied because I was suspicious or paranoid about SLED. Well, the first officers who arrive at the scene are not SLED. They're locals with whom he has a great relationship, and he first makes that lie to those folks. So I think if Alex is convicted, he's convicted on his own testimony.
What were some weak points in the presentation from the prosecution today?
I think it's just the length overall. Okay, and I don't want to be critical of Creighton. I've had lengthy trials too. You might think that at the end of the day the lawyers go home. They don't. You go home and work. So he's had 6 weeks of 16, 18, 20-hour days. It's exhausting. It's a big case. You can't say it all. So you really have to pick and choose. I think overall the length of it was too much. I think overall there were too many data points. So going back to if you show a jury a timeline and there's 50 things on the timeline, you've shown them nothing. So I would have combed some of that back. I would have stuck just with my strongest arguments, my best evidence forward first.
And again, that's the kennel, those good witnesses.
The timeline around the kennels, Dr. Kinsey, and the big lie.
And the big lie.
And keep going back to that theme, which he did an excellent job of.
Let's talk about the fact that we know that we're going to hear from the defense. Were you surprised to learn that Jim Griffin will present closing arguments for the defense?
I'm not. Dick is an excellent lawyer. He may be too bombastic. He has a tendency to slip into sarcasm, which doesn't communicate well. I don't think it will with this jury. They've obviously read the jury when they've both been talking to them, and I think their read is that Jim gets a better reaction from the jury. I think Jim is going to be more sequential, more able to lay out the reasons why they don't think the case has been made. And I think the fear is that Dick could offend just as easily as he could win jurors over.
What are some options for this jury? Guilty, not guilty, a potential hung jury, and if that's the case, what does that mean?
Well, they're all on the table, and frankly, any of those outcomes I think is acceptable based upon the evidence that's out there. We have 12 of our fellow citizens that have given up 6 weeks of their lives. They're as good as any other 12 people in the world to decide this. Whatever they say is the proper result. Hard to say. This could go anywhere, frankly.
Thank you, Ronnie Richter. Stay with us.